Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be pollarding back my willow trees here. So this is an update that I do on a regular basis every year around January, February time. I cut back my willow trees and I do an update on them and see how they've been doing. So a quick background to these willows. These are hybrid willows. I'm not sure the exact variety, but they'll have the species Salix filaminaris as part of the parentage. So they're very fast growing. They can grow over 4 to 5 meters a year, especially when they're pollarded, so really quick growing. And what we've basically done with them is we've used them as a windbreak. So it gets extremely windy here in this part of the world in North Scotland. We can get winds over 100 miles an hour, but the willows, being so flexible and so tall, give a really good break to the wind. Not so much in the winter when they're without leaves, but this willow tends to leaf up earlier than most trees and later than most trees. So we do have this in leaf from around March right through to November, so we do get quite a bit of shelter. So what we were doing originally is we were pollarding these yearly, but that meant in the winter time there wasn't really any windbreak at all after they've been pollarded. So what we do now is a 2-year pollard rotation, and we just pollard every other tree every year. So there's always half the material up in the air for the whole winter to give us that bit of shelter. So this year they've actually done quite well. So last summer it was quite warm, a bit warmer than average, and up here in North Scotland it's quite a cold climate, so the higher the temperatures the faster everything will grow. We don't really suffer from any extreme heat. And the other thing we had last summer is, although we had a little bit of drought, the drought wasn't as bad as previous years, so I'm hoping for some pretty good growth. And normally this section here, which is on top of the archway there, tends to give us the longest, straightest sections of stem in 1 year. And it looks like this year we could be getting close to our record, which I think was about 4.8 meters. It was close to 5 meters, I think. So I'll put the measurement up now. But we've had some particularly long sections of growth, and it's amazing that this can grow that fast in 1 year. So I'll go up closer and give you a closer look at the willows and so that a bit how they've been growing. So there's two sections really. There's this section on the right, and this section seems to grow particularly well. The willows here are getting quite thick, particularly this bit here. I don't know why, but this little section here, all the willows that we put in have survived. You can see there's no gaps. A bit to the left, 1 or 2 have died off, so there's a gap. But this section here, the willows just grow extra fast, extra tall. I think there must be a bit of extra moisture in the ground here. This ground is very sandy, so it dries out very quickly in summer, but there's a very high water table in winter, and the water table comes right up almost to the surface of the ground at times. In the summertime, that water table goes quite deep, and the problem is there's a very solid hard pan layer about 2 foot down, and a lot of the roots can't get through that. So I'm wondering if there's a break in the hard pan here and the roots have got through, and so these ones are doing much better as they can get more water in the summer. But you can see really nice thick stems. And you can see here, this one on the right, this is 2 years since this has been pruned, so I'll be pollarding this one back. This one here is a 1-year-old one, so this one doesn't need pollarding yet, and then at the back again another 2-year pollard. So you can see the difference. The stems are much thicker. Occasionally you do get some extra shoots coming out like this one here, which is only 1-year-old. You can see the difference in the bark colour. So I'll be pollarding these back, and what I do is I cut them back to where they sprouted last year. We keep them around the 1 meter level. Originally we were thinking of pollarding them down to the ground, but then we realised that was going to give us quite a sore back. So what we do now is, instead of coppicing them down to the ground, we pollard them to 1 meter level, and we just find this to be the perfect height, so that when we're pruning them, you don't have to reach up high to prune them, but you don't have to bend over. So this 1 meter height just makes pruning it much easier and a much faster job. So I'll be going along these. Not too much to be done in this area when it comes to selective pruning. All I really need to do here is take out every single one right back to where it grew last year and just leaving a 1 meter stump. On the right hand side, however, this area has always struggled a bit. In springtime something always comes along and eats off the new shoots of these willows, so they've struggled. Last year I didn't actually prune these, I left them all, so these are all now 2 or 3 year old pollards, even though height wise they're still smaller than the other trees. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be selecting them, so every other tree again, even though some of them will be going into their 4th year now. So some of them will be left, some of them will be pruned, but there's a bit of selective pruning that needs done. So you can see like this tree over here, unfortunately it's really starting to lean to the side. We've got some new growths from lower down. What I'll probably do is I'll cut it off at that section down there, allow one of these to grow up to a 1 meter height, and then cut it, and that will be the new 1 meter pollard, because where it's leaning, it's basically 2 growing in the same place. We've got some other ones like down here where there's loads of growth coming up from lower down. They need to be cut off, especially down towards the end here. This one's actually a different variety of willow, I don't know the type, it might not be a hybrid, it doesn't grow quite as quick. But you can see it's really bushy, lots of shoots coming off, so I need to reduce that right down, just to about 5 shoots or so it's less bushy. What we really want is long, tall shoots. When it gets bushy at the base, it doesn't really help much. What we want is a really nice, tall shoots at the top, so that we can keep the wind away and keep the garden nice and sheltered. The other selective pruning I'll be doing is if any shoots are leaning a long way across, I'll be cutting them off as well. This side isn't too bad because the winds are predominantly from this side, so it tends to blow the plants the other way. And these will only be shading out the raspberries underneath, which don't mind a bit of shade, so that's not a problem. But coming over to the other side here, this side they tend to hang over a little bit more, and this border has got plants that like quite a lot of sun. So you can see some of these, like these ones here, only a year old, but they're hanging over. I'll completely take them off, even though that's only a year old. I will try and stop some of that overhang so that these plants can get a bit more sun in the summertime. And so the only other thing really is the arches here. So when it comes to the arches, I cut off most of the new growth, and then what I tend to do every now and again, I'll put in some new twisting sections to tie it in. These are probably all a bit too thick and strong to tie in, but I'll have a look. I might tie in some new sections just to wrap them around. This one, interestingly, this one is a year older than the other archway, and it's already starting to graft together. So you can see here a lot of these stems are now grafting into each other, and they're becoming one giant stem, just all kind of welded together through grafting. So it's nice to see that's happening here. There are some dead canes. I'll need to try and take these out because that will inhibit any of this self grafting that it's doing, but it's nice to see that's grafting together as one giant stem. I'll take you now over to the other archway. As you can see, this archway is much wider. What I've done with this one is I've kept it quite loose at this end, and then it tightens up and it stays tight from about just before midway to the other end, and that's what I'm trying to keep with this one. I actually trained in about 4 willows on that side, only 1 willow on the left, and the idea is it's supposed to be quite loose on that side and then tighter as it goes over. So this one I might have more opportunity to tie in some new material, as it's a lot more and they're thinner, so they'll be more flexible. But generally I'm quite happy with the overall structure with this one. I don't think I'll need to tie in much more, so it's generally for the archway just cutting back basically a pollard and letting them resprout in the summer, and not too much tinkering or work on them because they're nicely set up now. But it would be nice to see maybe some of this thicken up. So what I'll be doing is, if I do leave any of them, what I'll make sure I do is, if for example I have a shoot coming up from the left hand side, I'll make sure I tie in the material right as far right as I can and cut off any other material. That way it thickens up along the whole length of the stem. You can see here, for example, when a branch grows and it comes along, every time a side branch comes off, the bit further along is thinner. So what I want to do is cut off some of these lower down branches and keep the ones at the far end. That way the whole structure should evenly thicken up. Otherwise what happens is you have the sides really thick and the middle tends to be quite thin. So I'm going to go ahead now and start pruning this. You can see some of the catkins are actually starting to flower as well. It's always a nice time of year to do this because you can get the catkins off and take them inside for a bit of decoration. They always look quite nice. So I'll go ahead now, just going to be using a pruning saw probably, because a lot of these stems this year are much thicker than in previous years, so loppers are probably a bit weak for it. So I'll just go ahead, start cutting this back, and then I'll show you what it looks like after that pruning is complete. So that's most of it cut, and as you can see it's looking a lot more sparse now, particularly down this end on the right where I had to really clear out quite a lot. Now I've also cleared out the sections on the bottom here which needs to be thinned out. There's some bits I still need to do on the other sections, so what I'll be doing basically is cutting any of the overhanging sections and any of the lower down branches, but I'll also be thinning them out slightly. So there's a few like this one here where there's lots and lots of stems. For these larger plants I can probably let about 8 or 10 stems, but the smaller ones I'll have to reduce down to 4 or 5. So what I'll be doing is reducing reducing this down, taking off the smallest ones, any overhanging ones. The reason for that is instead of growing lots of small branches, what I want is fewer branches, but these will thicken up more, and larger, thicker branches are just a little bit more useful, and also it will help us get a bit more height to the structure, and it'll keep it a bit thinner lower down. We want it thinner lower down because these ones are going to be sprouting up soon and shooting up and growing this summer, so we want a bit of space and light for them to be able to grow. Now there's also some lower sections like you can see down here. They sprout from lower down sometimes. They will also need to be removed. So I'll just go ahead now, tidy these up, and then I'll go and start on the archways. So that's the willows are now pruned. As you can see, quite a lot of material has come up. We've got this big pile down here. So we've got loads of material for using in the future if we need to, for stakes or chipping. And you can still see there's quite a lot of branches left. We're just cutting every other one and thinning out the others. So although it does look a little bit sparse now, there's still a decent amount of growth up there. And once this green's up in spring, it'll be really nice and green and give us a really good protection again. And then by the end of summer, the stuff that has been cut down to the base will be the height of these ones again. So I'll show you the archways. So this is the older arch and the narrower one. So you can see here, this is nicely weaved in, and I quite like the appearance of that one. I'll also show you the one down the bottom here. So you can see this one here. I've gone with the style that I've done in the past, where I've got it quite loose on the left here, and it gets tighter as it goes towards the right. One of them you can see is just sprung out. I need to put that one back in. What I often find is over the next 2 days or so, with strong winds, some of these will pop out, and I just need to put them back in, make sure they're secured. But if after a few weeks no more have popped out, then they will stay there permanently. So quite happy with this one. Again, I tied in quite a few new bits. I might actually take off some of these lower ones in the future because I don't want this archway to get any lower. I want it to be nice and clear so we can walk under it nicely. But that's looking quite good. And I'll now show you our longest one and show you how tall it grew this year. So this is probably the longest section of growth that we've had in 1 year. This one came off of the archway. This archway always has the most growth in 1 year because we pollard that every year. So we can show you this here. This is the, as I say, I think it's the longest one. There's one or two that were similar length, but we'll go along, we'll see how long it has got. And it's pretty close to the record previously. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll put on the screen what it was before. But you can see it's 4 meters 43 centimeters, so 443 centimeters. So that's pretty good height. That's in just one growing season, and considering last year wasn't a perfect growing season, it was quite dry at the beginning of the spring. That's pretty good going. It'll be interesting to see how this does this year. Hopefully we'll get a bit more rain this spring, but every year we seem to be getting drier and drier springs, so who knows what's going to happen. But anyway, well, this is how much wood we get every year. It's really handy for the garden, and that's the willow update done for this year. I'll see you guys again in 2025, and we'll just keep you updated every year as to how these willows are doing.